Can I get everyone's attention, please? Hello. Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order because Chairman Carter has another place he needs to be, and he was so kind to me this morning by letting me go first. We're going to go ahead and let you start with Senate Bill 95. One question, though, as you're walking up. Which one's better, the House or the Senate? You've been in both.
Bill before the House right now, it would be the House.
That's a great answer. By all means, go ahead and proceed with your bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you today Senate Bill 95. Two things about this bill. First of all, some of you who were here last year may recognize this bill. It's actually a bill that passed the House and the Senate last year and was vetoed by the governor. So I feel like, with full disclosure, I should let you know that. We do feel like we've made some adjustments to the bill, some tweaks, if you will, that will make it much more palatable, and I think that we'll be successful in getting it through this year. What this bill does, essentially, the reason for this bill is that it requires an employer to disclose employment-related information to a law enforcement agency that is inquiring about a potential employee. Now, keep in mind who we're talking about here. We're talking about the people who we hire, who governments hire, and give a gun and send out to protect the citizenry. We're talking about police officers. And there is a need to know about their previous employment history, a very legitimate need to know. And the reason we need that is because we need good people. We need to hire good people before we give them guns, before we send them out on the streets to enforce our laws, before when we get in trouble and we call somebody, we need to make sure we've got the right person in the right position. Unfortunately, over the past couple of years, it's turned out to be a problem. In fact, some of the figures that I can share with you is that over the past 2 years, we've actually had over 1,200 licenses of peace officers that have been revoked. That gives you an idea of some of the problems that we've been having. In order to have better employees, of course, if we can hire better, then we feel like we won't have as big of a problem with this as we have right now. Just to take you very quickly through the bill, what it does, again, is give a potential employer of a police officer the right, the ability to obtain written information that is in an employee's file. We offer protection to the company, the previous employer, as well as protection to the employee that we're looking to hire here. So we feel like we've covered it on all areas. Now, if you own a business like I do, most of you know that the only information that you'll release now about a previous employee is to say, well, they worked for us from this time to this time. And you might say, are they eligible for rehire? And you say yes or no. But what we're looking for here is to have the ability for these police organizations, for these potential employers, to get written documentation that may be in an employee's file. We're not talking about oral documentation. We're talking about written documentation. For instance, we're talking about possibly any merits that they may have gotten, anything that might have been, a promotion, an award, something like that. We're also looking for any records of discipline that might be in those records there. So, what we do is that we know that past conduct is indicative of future conduct. We understand that, and that's the reason we need this. As I mentioned before, there are safeguards in this bill for the previous employer. In fact, before you can get this information, the potential employer has to have the employee that they are interviewing sign a notarized document that holds harmless the previous employer for releasing this information. So we're very serious about this. We understand this is very important. So before we require this previous employer to release this information, they have to have a notarized document that's signed by the former employee, the potential employee of the new agency, that holds them harmless there. We also have safeguards in here for the applicant, for the employee. We have safeguards in here for them. If this information that we are able to obtain actually impacts their hiring ability, if it negatively impacts them, then they have the right. They have the right to refute that. And we give them in this bill the ability to do that. So we feel like we have safeguards in here to account for this. Again, I know there are concerns that we're getting into businesses that we shouldn't get into, but at the same time, let me remind you what I said at the very beginning. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about those people that we hire, that we give guns, and we send out on the streets for them to protect our citizenry. So you can imagine how critically important it is that we get the right person in the right position. And that's the reason for this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions that the committee members might have.
You got a couple, and who's on number 10? Okay, Representative Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Carter, thank you for bringing this forward. I do have a question for you, though. On lines 71 and 72, is there a definition in law somewhere else for clear and convincing evidence? There is? Okay.
Did she answer that?
That is a commonly used legal standing. Okay, that was my only question. That's only my question. That's my only question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Before I go any further, I meant to say something. If y'all would keep Chairman Talton in your thoughts. He had a death in the family today, and that's why he's not here, and he had to go back home. I meant to say that earlier, but just trying to get started. So just keep that in mind. Representative Yasmin Neal.
Thank you. When I did hiring for Sheriff's Department, all we did was just send a request to whatever agency, like an open records request, and they would redact the file and they send it to us. And the same thing, we send that same request to Post, and they just send us the file, and we just have the file. Sometimes we could go pick it up. Sometimes they mail it to us, and there'd be no problem. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, is there something within that process that's not covered that's causing the bill to be created? I guess I'm not understanding.
Well, and before I go any further, let me, Frank, where's Frank Rotunda? Okay, Frank Rotunda is with the Police Chiefs Association, and he is the one who's helping with this. But I'll take a stab at this, and this covers private employers as well. So I guess the ones you were dealing with were public employers. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this would take us into the private employers as well.
They fall under the open records? Is that no? They do not. Okay. So this covers the private sector.
That's right.
Okay.
Representative Darlene Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't see no. Oh, Mr. Chairman, yeah, you got a good promotion there. Okay, I was reading over this, and I know when you work for a city or county or someone that would be hiring, I was looking for E-Verify. Is that part of the normal processing, or should it be included in this? E-Verify, is that a process that you would automatically put the officer's application through to make sure that they are a citizen? I know it says that they must be, but do you use the E-Verify to do that? Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think it should be, and I think I do business with the county, and I have to certify to the county that I verify my employees through E-Verify. Okay. Thank you.
Chief and Frank, y'all may want to come on around just in case there's some other questions. So be by the microphone. And to touch base on that last question, every public place, such as a city or county, is supposed to be using E-Verify now. And if the Senate passes Representative Ramsey's bill, it will even have some teeth to it. So let's see here. Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Carter. Senator Carter, I don't know, maybe Mr. Rotundo, the sheriff chief, might be able to answer this one. On line 28, don't we currently already have in place where they have the officers that come in have a stringent process of entry that they when they are selected anyway? And if so, under this physical, emotional, and mental conditions, does this include drug testing? Besides psychological testing, drug testing?
Thank you. That's not part of the bill, but I will tell you about it. That's current law, pretty much. And basically, there's a form that's filled out. It goes to post counsel to determine whether they could go to the academy or not, and to provide a doctor's note saying that they're free of abuses of that nature. But unless the department puts them through individual drug testing, then they can be hired without drug testing.
And why would the department do that? I mean, what would be a
Because that's the
cost?
hiring agency.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, say the post would just be the licensing agency, such as if Chief Cotton wants to hire somebody, they have to apply to post, go to an academy, they'll come from another department with the license, and then Chief Cotton's HR persons would go through the file and do some additional background. And I suspect very strongly, since I know Chief Cotton's a part of the law school professional, that they probably do drug screening.
Well, I remember this bill, Senator Carter, from last year, which was, and it still is a good bill, because we need to do all we can to make sure that all of us are protected out there. So I appreciate the bill being brought back.
Representative Cook, you wave. Thank you. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, on line 59, it starts out by talking about a fee to cover actual costs incurred in copying and furnishing documents. Who is that fee charged to, the applicant or the employing agency?
The employing agency.
Thank you.
Any other questions by the committee? Chief Cotton or Mr. Rotundo, would y'all like to say anything on this bill? Because no one signed up to speak on this bill. Chief Cotton.
The only thing I would like to say is just, you know, when we're out here trying to find the best qualified applicant, and the senator hit it correctly, it's not always about what they did wrong. It could be what they did right. And when we go to a private employer looking for that candidate and say, who is this person, and basically a door is shut in our face, and the only thing you get is we hired him on this date, he made this salary, and he left on this date, you're kind of just left wondering. And at that point in time, you're trying to make a best guess at that point. And one thing we're asking for is that to really try to impress upon you that we're talking about a very small segment of society, the people that want to be law enforcement officers all across the state, not just in municipalities, but county, state, and local governments, that we get the best people. We're losing too many folks every year to investigations at post because they did something wrong as a police officer. And most of the time that would have been brought out in the background investigation on the front end. A lot of money could be saved for all of us on that way. So thank you for your time.
Do you have a question, Representative Yasmin Neal?
Times where there are a lot of private entities that all they do have is a start and end date, and they probably were wreaking havoc in between, but you never going to know that. So now thinking about that is very true. Yeah. So, good bill.
Or they may have been a stellar employee, too.
Yeah.
Good bill. That almost sounds like a motion, but I think we're about to get one. Chairman Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move do pass Senate Bill 95, SB 95, FA2.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the bill? All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
All opposed? Yeah. Congratulations, Chairman. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members of the committee. Mr. Chairman, Chairman Neal is going to be carrying this in-house.
As long as it wasn't Floor Leader Collins, we're good. All right, we have one more bill on the counter today. This is for a hearing only. We have many people that signed up for this bill, but it's going to be Senate Bill 186 by Chairman Mullis.
Thank you, Governor Bearden, for hearing our bill today. I'm sorry, am I in the wrong place?
No, that's no problem, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, look, I'm here today to talk about Senate Bill 186, and as some of you may know, I was once a firefighter, a fire chief in a little small town called Chickamauga. That was when I was a lot thinner and younger. Today I'd be a victim. But this bill is something that we've been working on for quite some time, actually. 6 years ago, my fire chief, Randy Camp from Walker County, came to me and said, you know, there's still some confusion in the fire service. We could do this better by some consolidation. So we ran up the flagpole and realized that, you know, we need to work on this. So not till 4 years later did we start doing this. We produced a bill and kind of put it out there to get some conversation. And we didn't move on it because the fire service thought we needed to work on it as part of their plan to consolidate in their 5-year plan, and they'll talk about this. But there's a lot of misconceptions about this bill. And this bill is not about my friend Commissioner Ralph Hudgens, and it's not about Lynn Perdue, and it's not about Chief Wall. It's not about Dale Mann. It's not even about Jim Beck. This bill is about the fire service. And how do we make it better that serves the people of Georgia? Our effort is to consolidate, to reduce the size, to make it more efficient. I think we're making 3 agencies to 1. And our account through the Senate Budget Office is that it will cut 10%. This is about a $6.9 million tri-agency now that will be $700,000 less after we put it together. So we're reducing the size of government, and that's what we're hearing out there in our constituency. But last year we had a Senate resolution to study this issue. We didn't have money to fund it. So the firefighters studied it with the Fire Chiefs Association and Firefighter Association. It's part of their long-range plan was a consolidation effort that we need. And they came up with this bill process that we're looking at today. I gave permission to the Firefighter Association and Fire Chiefs Association leadership to meet with Legislative Council, and they put this bill together. I'm just proud to be their huckleberry. Again, this is 3 agencies to 1. It's a reduction. It streamlines the process, makes it more efficiently, and reduces the size of government again. The Code of Georgia added the fire service to the Commissioner of Insurance. The Constitution has the Commissioner of Insurance as part of the Constitution, not the fire code part. This bill was overwhelmingly produced and supported in the Senate. 54 senators out of 56 signed the bill, and it passed unanimously. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions, go over any part of this bill, but I know there are a lot of people that would like to speak. I can answer questions now or come back when some of the folks speak on this issue, and we can drive this train however you'd like to.
Would you mind explaining just a little bit more in depth exactly what all it's bringing together and
Sure.
what it's pulling from? And for the committee members?
Well, currently, the fire service has many components, and we're currently working on, I think, 4, but we'll call them 3. And that's the fire safety under the insurance commissioner and the fire marshal's office under the insurance commissioner. The standards and training, which is currently under the governor's office, and the public safety, and the fire academy, which is under the public safety or the governor's office. We think that we can better serve the constituency of Georgia if we consolidate all those together. And I've talked about the reduction at that point. But this is all about fire service. There are a lot of misleading information that has most people, probably some in this audience, thinking it's about codes enforcement and regulations, but that is not the intentions of this at all. It's about serving the people better with a better fire service potential. And it's really sad that misinformation is being given out simply to try to defeat or delay or to halt or slow down the process. But that's not our intentions at all. The bill has some intricate parts about the details of it. This unifies the fire service, as I said, the 3 or the 4, or some may say the 2 to the 1, but it does reduce the service, or reduce the amount of agencies down to 1. The fire academy is repealed, and so is the standards and training, and the fire marshal's office, and it's all consolidated to 1. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to, Chairman Neal, or this Speaker Neal. I mean, I'm not sure what your position is.
You can just call me Jay.
Jay. Yeah, I know that. But for full disclosure, Jay is my rep, and I'm his senator. And we live 3 miles apart. But Chairman Neal, I'd be glad
Absolutely.
to entertain you.
And from what I understand, Chickamauga, which is Indian for City of Great Senators, what I've been told.
Well, it is true, and I just happen to live there. Isn't that ironic? It's amazing.
Very ironic. And
Chattanooga, you may add, is Cherokee for big city near City of Great Senator.
That's what I hear.
But that's all a myth.
That is
we're
what
talking about fire service today.
That is what I hear. And with that, we'll turn to Representative Frazier. Do you have anything to follow that with?
No, Jay. Senator Morris, my understanding is, for my folks in Burke County and Richmond County, is that this is just a consolidation of agencies administratively wise. Our fire services, our fire stations, our fire protection will not be affected in any way.
That's correct. Actually, they'll have more input because they'll have one place to call. Who do you call? There'll be one place. Where in the past they've been 4, 3, 2, and it's been quite confusing over the years. You'll hear testimony of that today too.
Thank you.
And again, Mr. Chairman, this is driven by the fire service, but again has nothing to do with codes enforcement or regulation. In fact, what we're going to propose in this is we're going to reconstitute the board and make sure the private sector is part of the appeals process if there ever is a problem, so that their issues will be handled in a very professional and in a manner that is very open, and the process will be geared to the private sector.
Any other members with questions for the senator?
Are you going to take a motion?
Not just yet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to we have several people that signed up, and we'll begin the list of those who want to speak on the bill, and we may bring you up at the end and give the members another opportunity to ask you questions after we've heard from some folks. Virginia Galloway. And if you don't mind, for the record, if you could identify yourself and who you're with before you begin, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Virginia Galloway. I'm the State Director of Americans for Prosperity, Georgia. I represent about 42,000 members across the state of Georgia. And I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on this today. We have long advocated as an organization that is for smaller, more efficient, less expensive government. We have long advocated for consolidation of any part of state government that we could consolidate in a reasonable way. So we are all about this consolidation of all these different elements. My problem comes in 25-2-2, where it creates a new government agency. And I really am not really excited about the idea of creating a new government agency and all that that entails. The expenses of that, the new appointments. I think that this committee really needs to carefully consider the cost and the long-term obligation when you create a new agency. I mean, I have been known to be on television saying that a government agency is the closest thing to eternal life this side of heaven, you know, and that's what could happen. Now, back to the consolidation. I think it'd be great to consolidate, but let's leave them under the insurance commissioner. We already have a department there. Commissioner Hutchins has proven himself capable of consolidating 3 agencies already into a division of insurance product review. And we're studying the right problem here. You're looking at the right problem. I know you have the right motives to be fiscally responsible, and we have almost the right solution, just not quite. So I just want to encourage you to oppose this or either rewrite it in a way that it goes under the insurance commissioner. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Keith Hatcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Keith Hatcher, representing the Georgia Association of Realtors, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share some of our viewpoint. First of all, I want to say that we are on record officially in opposition to Senate Bill 186, but I would like to share some background information as to where our position generated from. As the sponsor mentioned, and I guess actually before I even go into that, I do want to say that Senator Mullis has been extremely generous in working with us to address concerns that we brought forward, as have a number of individuals from the fire service community. And I think he's absolutely correct in that this legislation doesn't speak directly to the regulatory side. What we have a concern is that when you change the structure of government, it has an impact on how regulations are interpreted. And what I mean by that is currently today, if you own a piece of property and you should decide that you'd like to build a commercial building, there are certain things you must do to build that building, one of which is to have it reviewed by individuals from various fire safety people to make sure that you're building a safe building. And we're very supportive of that concept. But what we've learned is as you're going through that process, there are occasions where the code is not explicitly clear. That there may be one way to do it that's perfectly safe and fine and cost efficient. There may be another way to do it that's not as cost efficient, maybe safe, and so forth. And so you sometimes find yourself in a situation where you are negotiating with someone from fire safety as to how you are going to build your building. And in some cases, those individuals can be very zealous in their work. And I appreciate that. I understand their worldview and their lives center around fire safety, and I respect that. But under the existing system, if you find yourself in a position where you're negotiating with a fire safety individual and you feel like that you're not getting a fair hearing, under the existing structure, you can appeal that. And you can go to the insurance commissioner, an elected official, and make your case. And it's not uncommon. I believe it's done informally in most cases. You sort of informally go through that chain of command and have someone come in that maybe has a wider world view that's not centered solely on fire safety, but more, you know, what may be fair and reasonable in terms of you as a property owner, what you need to do to meet the government standard. Because again, it's not black and white. It's subject to interpretation. So our concern is by consolidating these branches and moving them away from the elected official and having them appointed by the governor, you remove or you insulate to some extent the decision maker in that process. And so in the case where you run into someone who may be overzealous, then they are the final word and you're done. And again, we believe under the current structure, we do have some latitude to work with individuals to allow a property owner to maximize the use of their property. At the end of the day, as realtors, that's our primary concern. We're advocates for private property rights. And we believe as a private property owner, you have a right to utilize your property with the least amount of governmental interference. Now, again, you got to do it safely, and we certainly want to comply with the code. But there are questions where the code is unclear. And if there's going to be an interpretation, we would prefer to have an elected official that we can turn to and ask for relief. Now, having said that, again, I do want to repeat that Senator Mullis and representatives from Fire Safety have been more than generous in working with us on trying to come up with some ideas, some creative ideas. Maybe there's another way to tackle this problem. I don't know. But my realtor members meet every week, once a week on Mondays. Last Monday, we did not have nearly as much information as we have today. So at that point in time, we took a position of opposition to 186. And I'm here to report to you, as an organization, we are opposed to 186. But I also want to report to you, having talked to some of my leadership since last Monday, we feel like that there is room to work here. And we are open to a dialogue. I want to continue to do that and see if maybe there's some way that we could come up with a solution that would be palatable to all the various parties. So having said that, I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions. I appreciate your time. If I can shed any light, I doubt, but I'll do my best.
Do you have a couple of questions, Representative Gassman-Neal?
Hello. I guess I'm just wondering, in your opinion or your viewpoint from the organization you represent, what's making you think that an appointed fire commissioner won't be reasonable or rational when it comes to appeals or anything in reference to the process?
Again, in our experience, when you deal with that appointed, again, the title itself, the fire person, their entire career has been spent on fire safety, and that's their focus. Whereas a statewide elected official who has a broader world view, say the insurance commissioner, for example, under the current structure, we believe he just has a wider world view. And is not going to be, if it's an interpretation situation, they're going to give more weight to factors beyond strictly fire safety. And again, it's a question of interpretation. And if you can do something just as safely and less costly, we prefer that. But if you, and again, 99% of these, everybody, all these people that are doing this work, please don't misunderstand. All the people doing this work are doing it for the right reason. I don't believe for a minute that any of them have any malicious intent in what they're doing. The problem is because they're so very narrowly focused, occasionally you will run into one who is a bit overzealous. And if you, for whatever reason, maybe it's a personality conflict, somewhere along the way you're not communicating well with that single individual. If they have the final word, you're done. And it's going to cost you. And we just feel like that an appeal process we think is a healthy thing. And again, I won't speak for the chairman, but as he said earlier, I think he's open to a dialogue on that front. And we very much appreciate his generosity in that respect.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the question.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me begin by saying, as a lawyer, I'm shocked to hear that the code isn't always filled with certainty. That's a little troubling. But in terms of some of the points that you made with respect to having a wider worldview, I want to challenge you a little bit on that, because it seems to me that we would want to have the fire safety expert. And if the key is public safety, wouldn't we want to defer to the person who is an expert in that? I mean, when I go get a haircut, I don't want somebody that knows how to use scissors. I want to know somebody that knows how to cut hair. And so, so walk me through why you don't think that somebody through this.
I believe where the code is specific, then yes, that's why the code is specific in those areas. You know, if it's a matter of life safety, then I think the code, the minimum code that we have, does that job. I think if it did not, we would be correcting that. I believe there'd be victims out there, and we'd be looking at the fire safety code. All I'm speaking to are the margins, where it's a question of, do you put a sprinkler here? I've heard stories where under the building code, you do not have to fire sprinkler, say, a certain closet. But under the fire safety code, you might have to put a sprinkler there. And I've actually heard anecdotal stories where someone will put in a sprinkler head, okay, for the fire guy to come and take a look. There it is. Then he leaves, and then you take it down. So when the building code comes by, it's not there, because if he sees it, he's going to say, what are you doing? That's not code. So that's where we're struggling to say, you know, how do we satisfy, you know, fire safety? I'm not suggesting we do anything below what's minimum fire safety, but it's just not always clear. And in the margins, sometimes the individual that's insisting on the sprinkler in the closet may not be making the right decision.
That I understand. And who is bringing forth those conflicts between the code and then the safety issues? Because if the regulations are in conflict, that should be brought to somebody's attention and remedied.
Well, that's sort of working through the channels. Those where they're in direct conflict. I use that as an example. There are others where it may not be a conflict between building code and fire code. It's just a question of interpretation of the fire code. You know, is this a closet? Is this not a closet? You would be shocked at some of the conversations that take place on a building site. And again, if you've got a third party that's maybe not as vested in one avenue, who can look at it in a bigger picture and say, look, let's not sprinkler the closet.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have one other question on the appeal issues, if you'll indulge me. With respect to that, you stated your concern that you won't get a fair hearing from somebody who's appointed, or there's the possibility that you won't get a fair hearing as opposed to an elected official where you can hold them accountable. I have two questions with respect to that. Can't you put pressure on the governor, who is an elected person? And secondly, with respect to the appeal in 25-2-10, you have appeal rights to the courts. Do you think that that is appropriate, inappropriate? What are your thoughts on that as a remedy to appeal?
Two responses. We can and do put pressure on the governor. It does happen. The fact of the matter is the governor has a lot on his plate. The elected insurance commissioner has less to worry about. And so we feel like it's a little easier to get an appointment with the insurance commissioner than it is with the governor. The line's not as long. So we feel like that, again, is sort of government closest to the people. It's easier to get to that person. We're not saying we wouldn't have a fair hearing with the governor or the governor's appointee. What we're saying is having the elected guy that's only got a few items to deal with is preferable to a governor who has to deal with all the state's problems. Okay? On the court side, the situation we deal with there is much like, I'll use an analogy a friend of mine shared with me earlier today, and it's sort of like a Little League baseball game. Yeah, you can, you know, every time a decision's made, you can get in the face of the referee, but guess what? You know, or the umpire. The more you do that, then down the road, the more discretionary decisions are made, they're probably not going to go your way. So we can sue them every day, and all of a sudden, you don't get a lot of permits, and you're not building very quickly. You're spending a lot of time and resources in court, and you're paying a lot of interest on loans because you can't build because you're in court defending your rights.
Right. I get that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Representative Maddox, you got two buttons pushed. I can't go any higher.
That's a very good question, Representative Matt. The truth of the matter is, when we first engaged in this issue, we didn't know the number on that. In doing some research, I don't know that there's been a lot of formal requests actually applied in terms of appeals. Our understanding is it's much more done on an informal basis. And quite frankly, what I'm also hearing is that the current, and I forgive my, I apologize, I don't really know the number, but what I was going to say is that what I do understand is that in the current structure, most of those informal appeals do not even make their way to the actual commissioner. Most of them are handled by the state level, and I forgive my ignorance of the titles, but the fire people within the department at the state level, that as it's been described to me as we're doing this research and I'm getting up to speed, that most of these cases are negotiated between those individuals within the department and the local party. So I don't even know if it gives rise, I don't think it gives rise that often all the way to the insurance commissioner. Now we can argue about, does that happen because the implication is the insurance commissioner is elected and available to step into the situation if needed? That I don't know. Well, I wouldn't argue that point. We have a very large grassroots organization, and we tend to have success when we approach elected officials. They tend to be sensitive to our request.
Is it because of the fear of getting them beat in the next election?
I think that's a motivating factor, sir. I do believe it's a motivating factor.
Well, I mean, I know that, but I mean, I'm not that naive to understand that's what we're talking about here, that we prefer elected officials so that we can motivate a movement against them to be elected. But I just don't see, you got an appointed official. I mean, I think there's recourse there. If somebody's got somebody on their staff that's not doing a good job, you just can them. You don't wait till the next election, you fire them.
Well, again, it's been our experience that someone appointed, or lack of a better term, a bureaucrat, is much less open to a dialogue than is an elected official. That's a very broad general statement, but we believe it to be true.
I don't see any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Commissioner, I took an assumption. Are you going to stick around to the bitter end, or would you like to go ahead and go? Okay. I just noticed you were last on the list. I wasn't going to keep you there if you didn't want to stay there. You sound like a good attorney. Deborah Nesbitt, ACCG.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I just wanted to say that the ACCG does support this bill. One of the tenets of our policy platform this year is the consolidation and streamlining of government services, and we believe that having the one place to go for the fire services would be a benefit to the counties in their administration of their fire departments. As to where the department resides, we'll leave that up to you as the policymakers, but we just wanted to go on record as saying is we support the consolidation and the one-stop shop, if you will, for fire services in Georgia. And with that, that's all I have today. Thank you.
Any questions? Don't see any. Thank you, ma'am. Mark Schroeder.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much for letting me come and talk to you. I'm kind of going to bounce all over what the previous gentleman was here and talking about. My name is Mark Schroeder. I'm an architect. I'm a principal in a company called Vienendahl Cave. We're an interior design firm. I don't build buildings. We do all the interior fit-ups in commercial office buildings throughout the southeast. If you take a look out the window on the outside and you see an office building, that's the work I do, is in all these office buildings. I deal with the fire marshals every single day. I am well versed in the codes, and I know exactly what they go through. I appreciate what they do. I've got great working relationships with many of the fire marshals in many of the outlying counties, so I want to be very clear on that. I also wanted to be clear on what I'm talking about is not, it doesn't have to do with new building construction. It has to do with existing building construction. Representative Holcomb, you asked a question before about the codes and how they could be construed and how it would be, you would get a different answer along those lines. I deal in existing buildings that were built under a completely different set of codes, and frequently what happens is a new set of codes is adopted, and the officials try to apply those new codes to a building in which was built under a completely separate set of codes, and I can't make it work. There are differences, there are nuances in the buildings that are different from what the new codes say, and there is absolutely nothing I can do to make that work short of ripping down the building, which is not going to happen. So that being said, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I also represent an organization called BOMA, Building Owners Managers of Atlanta. I'm the vice chair of the Government Affairs Committee, so I'm representing over 1,000 members citywide that all have the office buildings and are part of the organization in there. Why we are looking at SB 186, we are not opposed to many of the portions of that bill. What we are opposed to is moving that office into one just straight under the fire marshal's office. As the gentleman said before, if you have a question, and it does happen, the codes are not clear, they're not black and white, they're very gray, and there are lots of questions. And I challenge fire marshals every day on these, and sometimes I do the best I can to apply those codes and make it work within these existing buildings that I work in. Again, a lot of the time I can't make it work. That leaves the building owner with a building that they can't lease, which creates an enormous problem. If we have somebody that we can go to and bring these situations to and talk about other things beyond life safety, economic impact, economic development, because believe it or not, the decisions that are being made are not just for my building or the one building I'm working in. It's for everything. It's setting a precedence for all construction within that area. If we can go to and talk to somebody that has a varied opinion, it is very advantageous to the building owners to be able to do so. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. So I don't want to take up too much time. I apologize if anybody has any questions.
Don't see any. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Okay.
Tom Aberhold of the Georgia Apartment Association.
Good afternoon, Your Eminence and the Committee of 12. I don't think we can go any further, but somebody's going to try. I'm Tom Adderhold. I'm with Adderhold Properties in Atlanta, Georgia. I represent the Georgia Apartment Association. In the Atlanta Apartment Association, we manage, operate, and maintain over 1.4 million units in the state of Georgia. And we're very interested in the safety of our residents and our properties. As a matter of fact, I have a great deal of respect for our firefighters, and I've had some direct connection with probably some of the guys in this room for a fire and a tornado that we may have had at one of our local properties. But these guys put their lives on the line all the time, and we fully respect them and everything they do. We're not against this bill per se. We would like, if possible, to have it perhaps tabled or held this year so we as an industry can get our hands around the implications of the change. On the face of it, the concept of placing all fire services into a standalone department is not an issue. However, should this committee decide to move forward, we encourage the committee to create an impartial appeal process. Now, that's been brought up by several different people already, so I don't need to rehash it again. But the overall viewpoint here is there are conflicts in code enforcement, life safety, fire safety. All of these things do happen. It's going to continue to happen no matter how well you put these codes together, because every single building is slightly different and something else comes up. It just does. The key is to have a third party who has a broader scope to review it and find a way for all the parties to ultimately agree in the process of how things are to be built. One way to accomplish this would be to leave the code adoption and interpretation in the hands of the insurance department as it is now. That's just one method. Regardless of how this bill is handled, we would appreciate your help in making sure that an appeal process is put into place to allow that third-party objectivity. That's really all I have to say at this point. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Scott Carter.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the time for being here today. I am Scott Carter, and I'm Fire Chief for the City of Cartersville. I'm also President of the Georgia State Firefighters Association. And before I attempt to go to any prepared remarks, I'll have to admit I'm confused by the titles of what each one of you really are now, and I'm kind of scared to proceed with that. But I'm also kind of confused to some of the testimony that I've heard earlier. And one thing that I want to clear up, first of all, talking about the history of cooperation, and speaking on behalf of my city, within the city of Cartersville, a lot of these code issues or questions that may occur, they're handled at the local level. Because within the city we have a better understanding of what our community really is, what our structural problems that we have. And we have a very good history in the city of Cartersville of working these situations out. It's a matter of coming to the table through the review process and everybody give, because my ultimate goal as a fire chief, it's not about just fighting a fire. My job that I'm sworn to do is to protect the lives of the citizens of Cartersville, but I'm also sworn to protect the property and the investment within that property, because there's a huge economic input that comes back. And we would never do anything within our local jurisdiction to degrade that economic impact. It's all about the improvement of it. So naturally, on the local level, we're going to want to work and cooperate. If we have an issue that we do not understand, we simply would call the current staff at the State Fire Marshal's office, because we know where they are, and work it out through their code issue, or through the codes, which incidentally, according to the bill, the way they understand it, it's the exact same people that are sitting in that office now will be the exact same people that's sitting in that office tomorrow, if successful with this bill. It's just simply moving them across the street. We are willing to work through some form of appeals process, as Senator Mullis has come forward. We just want to make the fire service better. And in making the fire service better, then we're able to protect the apartments better. We're able to protect the rental property better. We're able to protect the home builders better. We're able to do a better job so that we have a safer, more efficient community. Our association, we do represent Georgia's fire service. We represent career, we represent volunteer. We represent from the firefighter to the chief. And we are here today in support of Senate Bill 186. The simple reason that we support this bill is the fact that it just makes good common sense. The fire service in Georgia is fractured. There's a major disconnect with multiple agencies looking over different aspects of the fire service. This gets confusing. It was brought up discussing the confusion sometimes between the code. As a fire chief, if I had an agency, a one-stop agency that I could depend upon to help clarify and give me direction as I needed it, then those issues that he discussed would all be solved. Now, this creates a difficult situation for all of us to protect our local communities. If you had a question right now concerning the fire service, I dare say that what you would do is you would call your local fire chief. Well, the local fire chief, if he doesn't have that answer, then we have to begin the road, and he will call point A. And then sometimes, most times, he gets addressed over to point B, and then to point C. And lots of times we wind back up at point A again. But as a fire chief, I just simply do not have one place that I can call to solve these problems. And we need coordination at the state level. We feel that Senate Bill 186 falls in line with your wishes to streamline government and to become more efficient in Georgia. Currently, no one, including you or me, can go to one place for any answers. The Georgia State Firefighters Association, we see this agency as a single department that can empower the local departments to do their job. We're not asking for a department to take over the fire service. We're not asking a department to do it for us. We're just asking for a place to where we can go, where we can simply have a template to go by, an information source, and to empower us to be able to do our local jobs at the level. It's a clearinghouse, if you will, for local service delivery and protection. Now, this is especially true in the smaller communities in Georgia. Now, I'm fortunate. I'm fire chief for the city of Cartersville. I have citizens that have established a tax base large enough to where we can be fairly self-sufficient on all of our issues, training, investigations, and inspections. But the majority of the state in Georgia is not that way. The majority of the state in Georgia is very rural. My home county of Polk is completely volunteer, and they have no place to go. Just take the simple fact of origin and cause investigations. Now, as a fire chief, by law, I am responsible for origin and cause investigations within my community. It is my job by law to determine the cause of that fire. Well, what if I don't have an origin and cause investigation program? How do I get one started? Well, the simple road goes like this. I would begin by calling the State Fire Marshal's office to see what's out there. They don't currently have any form of template to help me set this up. They'd say, well, you need to go get you some training as far as an origin cause investigator. Great. So then I'm going to take it, I'm going to make another call. And I'm going to try to get on the roster of a class for Arson 1 and then Arson Level 2, which is through GPSTIC, Georgia Public Safety Training Center, which, by the way, is even taught by the Georgia Police Academy, not the Georgia Fire Academy. If I successfully pass those two courses, then I'm going to need to become a certified investigator within the state of Georgia. So therefore, then I'm going to wind up going over to Georgia Firefighters and Standards and Training Council to become certified as an investigator within the state of Georgia, which also brings on a whole new set of training requirements that I'm going to have to meet annually on top of everything else to maintain that certification. And then, about a year to a year and a half later, if I'm lucky enough to meet the timetable, on the first Tuesday in February, I'll be able to come to the steps at the Capitol and get sworn in as an investigator. Now you say, well, why is all this important? Because in a court of law, if I miss one step, where's my lawyer? If I miss one step, a good defense attorney is going to have that arson case completely thrown out if I miss any piece of that. Now, I know that process because I've been through it, and I've been through it for 27 years. But you take the rural firefighters, you take the volunteer firefighters in the state of Georgia, which is by far the most, they don't know this process, and they need an efficient one-stop shop. Now, it's efficient, it's cost-effective, and it's common sense. And I just want to wrap up by reading for you, which I know that you all know. In the Constitution for the state of Georgia, in Article 1 in the Bill of Rights section, in Rights of Persons, it states in paragraph 2, protection to person and property is the paramount duty of government and shall be impartial and shall be complete. If you can allow Senate Bill 186 to move forward with whatever changes we need to do, and if you will hold on to this true naive concept that we have that this department will make it better for the fire service, then we will have an approach that is common sense and an approach that is complete. And thank you for the time.
Do you have a question, Representative Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to you reminds me of my days in the armed forces where unity of command was an essential principle, and it sounds like you all don't have that right now, and that's ultimately what you're seeking through this, is to have some unity of command. And it also reminds me of the Henry Kissinger quip about who do I call when I have to get in touch with Europe. 3 different numbers, and it sounds like there's at least that many numbers here. So if this were to be approved, is that going to solve the problem?
I have never seen any bill in the state of Georgia or any law that solves all the problems, but it will get us headed in the right direction. Do we expect there to be changes down the road? Sure. There things that need to be corrected, but this would be a major step towards that very unified central command that we are so accustomed to. Yes, sir.
I got a bill to solve all the problems, but I can't get it heard yet.
Well, being the president or empress governor, you know, I'm sorry.
I got a little mutiny going on, but that's all the questions I do.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and for what you do. Mark Woodall.
just going to go with Mr. Chairman. All the other ones have been taken up. Members of the committee, I'm Mark Woodall on behalf of Associated General Contractors. We're the commercial builders that build the assembly occupancy buildings that are governed by the state fire code. I want to go on record on this bill of officially being neutral. We're with our friends on this bill. There are good folks on both sides of this issue, and I more than anything, Mr. Chairman, would like to try and respond to some questions that Mr. Hatcher and some of the others have raised, and what our experience is. We will tell you, we would tell you that if we were going to start with a clean piece of paper with regard to our code design and review and inspection process, we wouldn't do it like we have it today. Currently, with our current code responsibility in Georgia, we have a building code that's under the administrative responsibility of the Department of Community Affairs. We have a fire code that is with the State Insurance Commissioner's Office, and we have the Department of Labor. I have no idea how, but is responsible for boilers, elevators, and escalators. So you have all three of those, and there's probably more that y'all can speak to as well. What designers and owners and contractors want is efficiency, clarity, and we have no problem at all being held accountable for having the code being designed. I mean, the project being designed to code and being built to code. But there's an awful lot of gray out there, and it wasn't too long ago, and our firemen and audience can attest to this, that we had two different codes, the building code and the fire code, that told you to do exactly the opposite on sprinkling a elevator shaft or not. And so the industry cannot serve two masters. We have to be held accountable to a standard, and that's what we'd like to do. We appreciate the sponsor and the proponents of the legislation for working on this a long time. We recognize and appreciate it. But this section of the bill, section 6 and 7, that impacts our industry, we're just getting brought into this session a number of weeks ago. And we want it to work, believe me, but we would like to have the time and be cautious so we don't just do something that we end up trying to come back and fix later. We support consolidation. We're going to try not to suggest where it needs to be, but we would like it to be when we have a plan submitted that's approved by the state fire marshal's office, and we're going back out there to construct that project. When we get down the road after time, money, and effort has been expended, and at 80% inspection we're told to do something different, that's a problem, and that happens. And it happens a lot. So with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Suzanne Williams.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Suzanne Williams. I represent the Home Builders Association of Georgia. I'll be very brief. I would like to start out saying I appreciate my good friend Senator Mullis, who's been a big supporter of ours, coming forth with this legislation. Contrary to what some folks in the audience may believe, I do have a lot of respect for the firefighters, and I appreciate all they do. I have been involved. My home caught on fire 10 or 15 years ago, and I appreciate what y'all did for us. That being said, I want to kind of echo what Mr. Woodall said. We just were made aware of this bill several weeks ago. It's a 26-page bill, and we certainly just have not had the time to digest and put our arms around it. The Home Builders Association of Georgia currently is in a monitoring position. Mr. Woodall uses neutral. We're using monitoring, in that, we would like to be able to be at the table if this bill goes forward to be studied. We'd like to be at the table and offer some suggestions once we can get our arms around that. With that being said, I just want to say thank you, and we'll be happy and look forward to working with those as this bill moves forward.
Not see any questions. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
David Kimbrell.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to try to come up with some fancy name. So, I'm David Kimbrell. I'm the president of the Georgia Association of Fire Chiefs and fire chief in Hall County. And a couple of things I want to discuss today. Chief Carter talked about a fractured fire service. I don't want anybody to get the opinion that the fire service doesn't know what's going on. We actually know what's going on. Sometimes people trying to get answers have a difficult time finding those answers. And I began to wonder, if you had a question, how would you find out that answer? And I looked at the back of your directory, great directory, by the way, all of your smiling faces, so we can tell who you are, and tried to figure out, if you had a question, who could you call? You can call Colonel Bill Hitchens, find out a law enforcement issue. You can call Director Vernon Keenan, call Vance Smith. You can call a lot of people, but you can't find one person on there to call to answer your fire questions. That's what this bill does. This person, it would be a cabinet level, if the governor had a cabinet level position on the governor's staff. And I think back to when the governor's inauguration was snowed out. Not long after that, he established an old executive order establishing what Representative Holcomb was talking about, the Emergency Operations Command. In that executive order, it specifically lists the Director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, Colonel Hitchens, the Adjutant General. When you saw that press release, you saw Colonel Hitchens, Director Keenan, Vance Smith, Terry Nesbitt. There's no fire representation there. Fire service was out there answering the majority of those calls during that time. This bill takes care of that. I'm sorry. And it directly brings this person right at the direction and the staff level or cabinet level of the governor, and we think that's exactly what needs to be done. You've heard a lot of people talk about, and we appreciate people looking and questioning and monitoring. Home builders, 1 and 2 family dwellings are exempt from the fire code, so we appreciate Suzanne looking at that. We also appreciate everyone else who's looked at that. We're not changing any of that code. We're taking the same people who look at that today, moving them under this new commissioner, combining those departments into one. So the same people that have been handling those appeals, the testimony has said that it's never reached the commissioner level. The same people who've been handling those appeals are going to handle them whenever this bill goes into effect. So that's not changing at all. A lot of people will say, well, this is a new bill. It may be new to some people, but it's not new to the fire service. Senate Resolution 898 back in 2004 was passed by the Senate, recognizing the fire service for their planning efforts and their strategic planning. Georgia Fire Service published their 5-year strategic plan in 2005. All this is part of that documentation. Lost my place. Senate Bill 320 was dropped in 2005 to consolidate a couple of agencies together and never made it out of the House. This actually is building on that. 2 Senate resolutions that were passed and adopted by both houses and were never funded, passed unanimously in both houses. In 2010, Senate Resolution 513 was passed again. We realized that times were hard, so the fire service, like someone mentioned, formed their own study committee. The study committee met many times and decided that we would wait to see what the governor thought, the new governor election, what he thought and what his mandates were going to be. So we listened to what the governor said. At his inauguration, Governor Deal says, let's be frugal and wise. Let's restore the confidence of our citizens in a government that's limited and efficient. That's what this bill does. It limits government and makes it more efficient. Then shortly after that, in his State of the State address, Governor Deal again said, we're entering a new era of smaller government and greater responsibility. Government must pull back, but Georgians in our strong communities, big and small, have what it takes to fill the gap. I believe that the citizens of this great state are ready to rally in this time to achieve great things and to create a better Georgia. As elected leaders, we must sound the call and demonstrate a new form of statesmanship. I call on all Georgians to support their elected officials when they make the tough choices to ensure future prosperity. And I think that's what you're here for today, is to make some tough choices. You're consolidating some agencies together, and the pushback may be from the bureaucratic folks there. You're not getting a lot of pushback from the people that's going to be consolidating. Second on top of that, again, I could continue to go on, is Lieutenant Governor Cagle responded to the governor's address. By looking for efficiencies in government and making cuts where appropriate, we can ensure that our state's most critical priorities, economic development, education, and public safety, are appropriately funded even in these challenged economic times. We feel like this bill has been in the hopper, if you want to say it that way, for a long time. The fire service has been studying it. We did not, and maybe that's something, we're rookies at this. I'm a rookie from Hall County, but we have a lot of political savvy and good sense in Hall County, as represented by my representative there, Doug Collins. So maybe we should have brought those people on board, but we feel like it's been working for a long time, and we don't feel like that studying it any longer would benefit anything. We spoke with several different people, and we asked today for your favorable passage and move this forward. We think that this is exactly what the governor has been asking for, and we're here to do that.
Mr. Kimmer, I don't see any questions, but I have one. On this state committee y'all had, were these meetings open, or were they out to the public, notifying industries to the meetings? Or?
This was a fire service study committee put together by the Fire Chiefs and Firefighters Association to look at it, made up of industry people in the fire service, or basically firefighters and fire chiefs, inspectors, investigators.
Okay, I keep on hearing a lot of comments about public safety. I'm going to wait till after the commissioner speaks to bring back up. Chairman Mullis has a couple more questions, but I do appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you for being with us.
I have with me my Chief Financial Officer, Chris Walker, who can address the fiscal impact, which has not been addressed, about how much more this is going to cost the state of Georgia. And the money that is spent, the additional money that's spent on this, comes out of the pockets of the taxpayers. And I think that's something that we, especially in these economic times, we really need to take into account. I'd like to address, before I start, though, or before we talk about that, and I'll let Mr. Walker address that. I think this all came about from a press release that I think all of you in here probably know that I ran for 20 months to be Georgia's insurance commissioner. And I put out a press release, and I don't remember the date, but it was sometime early in the campaign. It says, Hudgens endorses consolidation of fire agencies. And that's exactly the truth. Let me read the last paragraph. It says, a consolidated state fire agency would be headed by a state fire commissioner who would be appointed by the governor. Hudgens further states, in these times of limited budget resources, we must look at ways to streamline government. Consolidation of these agencies would cut costs as well as providing a better service for our citizens. I stand by that today. I stood by it then, and I think that consolidating the State Fire Marshal's Office, the Georgia Firefighter Standard and Training Council, and the Georgia Fire Academy is a wonderful idea. I just don't think creating a new state agency is the proper solution. I never envisioned that this press release would be interpreted to say I'm in favor of creating a new state agency. I envision these two, the Firefighter Standard and Training Council and the Fire Academy, being brought under the purview of the Department of Insurance. When you look at the personnel and the state budget that would be affected, the existing state budget, not taking into account any of the additional money that it would cost to create a new state agency, of the personnel affected, there'd be 67 people coming out of the Department of Insurance under the State Fire Marshal. There would be 10 people coming from the Firefighters Standard and Training Council, and there'd be 16 people coming out of the Fire Academy. So the Department of Insurance and Fire Safety would be donating, so to speak, 72% of the personnel, yet we're going to take them away from the Insurance Commissioner's office and put it over here in a new agency. As far as the budget, 76% of the existing budget, not taking into account the new money that it would cost in appropriations to fund a commissioner, would fund real estate, would fund IT, all of the other aspects, and I'm going to let Mr. Walker address that.
I respect my friend Senator Mullis very much, but for him to come up here and tell you that we're going from 3 agencies to 1, I don't agree with that. If you want to go 3 agencies to 1, then bring these 2, the Firefighter Standard and Training Council and the Fire Academy, into the existing Department of Insurance where the State Fire Marshal resides right now. We would be going under Senate Bill 186, going from 3 agencies to 2, because you're taking these 2, the Firefighter Standard and Training Council and the Fire Academy, and then bringing the department, the part of the departments of insurance, the Fire Marshal, over here and creating another agency. We're still going to have a Department of Insurance. So you're going to go from 3 to 2. If you want to go 3 to 1, then put it under the Department of Insurance. Several of these people here said that they were not asked to give their input in this particular piece of legislation. Let me tell you when I found out about it. I found out about it at a reception when one of the senators told me, "Hey, I signed on to your bill today." I said, "Really? What bill was that?" He said, "The consolidation of all the fire service agencies." I said, "What? That's not my bill." He said, "Senator Mullis said you were in favor of it." I am in favor of consolidation. I'm not in favor of Senate Bill 186. I went to Senator Mullis, and I found out that he already had 43 senators that had co-sponsored this. He had 54. That's unheard of. I was in the Senate 8 years. To get 54 senators to sign on to a piece of legislation, I think the only thing you could do that would be for mom or apple pie, really. And many of them, I said, "Well, I see you signed on to the dissolution of the state insurance department." And they said, "Well, I was told you were in favor of it." Well, I am in favor of consolidation. I'm opposed to the way Senate Bill 186 does it. I think we need to take a deep breath. We need to consult. We need to look at this over the summer. I'm not saying kill the bill. I'm saying let's just leave it in the hopper, in the breast of the committee. Let's look at it over the summer. Let's look at if we want to create a fire safety board, which Senate Bill 186 does. That's great. If the board wants to come up with 3 nominees to be the state fire marshal, then I think that's a good idea. Let the governor choose with the concurrence of the insurance commissioner. That's the way it's done in Florida to select some positions. But I think we need to take a deep breath and really look at this and bring all of these people to the table. The Georgia oilmen are not here. I've got a letter in my desk, in my folder right here from the PCI, which is the Property and Casualty Insurance Association. They say they oppose this. They think it ought to stay right where it is in the insurance office. I'd like to get Chris Walker, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, to just briefly address the fiscal impact. And there has been a fiscal note asked for in this piece of legislation. To my knowledge, it was asked for just last week. I have not seen it. A bill that has significant financial impact is supposed to be asked by day. It's supposed to be introduced by day 20. This bill was introduced on day 22, so it's missed the deadline. But I would just like for Mr. Walker to address the fiscal impact with your permission.
Mr. Commissioner, we'd like to answer a question first
Yes,
before
sir.
we change
I'll
gears.
be glad to.
Representative Maddox.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, I just had a quick question. You had started out and you read in your press release where it said, it sounded like that what you had said was kind of outlined what this bill was trying to do in consolidating those 3 departments, but
Right.
you said you never envisioned that it would be
A new agency.
But did your statement say that there would be a new commissioner appointed by the governor?
Yes, and that could be the state fire marshal would be it would be the head of this group could be appointed by the governor.
And
Yes,
who
sir.
would he or she answer to?
Would answer to the board. If we went with the thought process in 186, he would answer to the board. It'd be like an executive director of this agency. The appeals would then come up to me as a commissioner of insurance.
And that's just what I was trying to get at, just because when you mentioned that there would be a new commissioner appointed, almost it made it sound like to me there was
Wait, okay, all right, go ahead.
in the statement that you read talked about, you know, the appointment of a new commissioner, and I was just trying to figure out how, in your plan, or what you envisioned, who a new commissioner appointed by the governor would answer to and be responsible to. Would that commissioner be beholden to the insurance commissioner?
He would be under the direct supervision, and the fiscal responsibility would be under the department. It would be folded in. It would be like there are 31 separate entities that are attached to 9 different agencies of the state, yes. And I can give you a listing of those, and that would be the same way. You would have basically an executive director. I think we ought to call him the state fire marshal, to be over all of these 3 existing pieces of fire safety in the state of Georgia. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. That was
Okay.
it.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Just to speak to the actual mechanics of taking a state agency and parsing out part of the operations of that agency, and then taking another state agency and parsing out part of the existing operations of that agency and combining them into a new agency with a new commissioner, a new bubble of staff around the commissioner, and the associated admin support that would be required. We've taken a look at that, and you know, the first thing you have to do, obviously, is you want to be pragmatic, and my boss wants to be conservative about it. We're not here to blow big numbers at you. We took a very conservative approach, but just start with your IT backbone. It takes a certain amount of IT backbone, servers, firewalls, filters, licenses, all those type of things. And forgive me, I'm not an IT expert, but it takes a certain IT backbone to operate the Office of Commissioner of Insurance, whether the fire marshal's office is with us or not. We're going to have those servers, those firewalls, the backup, the security. All those parts of the puzzle are still going to be there. Same thing I would submit to you, and I haven't spoken to any of my colleagues at DPS, but those agencies that are attached there, when they come away, there's going to be a certain backbone that's going to remain there, and it's going to be there regardless. So we agree that we've got the existing costs remaining with the agencies as they're currently constructed, and this new agency that's comprising the fire marshal, the fire academy, and the training group is not going to be able to bring that infrastructure with them, because it's necessary to remain with the people that are using it currently to keep current operations going. So we're going to add that, and our current estimation is that you would expect to spend somewhere around $1 million by the time you bring in the technology, whether it's done through GATE, whatever you want to call it, or whether it's done through a private contractual scenario or hiring more IT staff. However it's done, you're looking at approximately $1 million just in outfitting the technology piece with a new agency, and that's $1 million that's not currently in either budget. The other piece, and I won't get too deeply into that because I think it's more subjective, but I would assume that we can all agree when you appoint a new commissioner, there's a certain amount of salary and benefits that goes with a new state commissioner, and a certain, even if it's a small bubble of staff in a front office around a commissioner, you're going to have some significant spend there, as well as, for instance, just in our shop, for payroll, for instance, we've got one payroll person that does payroll. Now, that one payroll person has to be there whether these 67 people would stay or go, because we still have to process payroll. I would submit it's probably the same on the public safety side of the house as well. So you're going to have someone to handle the accounting, financial piece of the new agency as well. I would, again, conservatively estimate between front office, and this is having worked in 5 or 6 state agencies, I would submit that probably between front office expense, commissioner, deputy, direct reports that would come on board new, and the additional administrative function necessary to run the new agency, you would probably be looking at least another $500,000, and I would feel very safe and say probably more than that. So that's roughly $1.5 million to $2 million that would not be baked into either of these current budgets that we would have to, someone has to come up with at some point in time, and that's the end of my discussion. I'll be glad to take any questions. Or
Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Hudgens, what's the breakdown in your duties? If this were to be enacted, how much of your duties would be lost or impacted by this being taken over by somebody else?
In my duties personally as the as the Commissioner of Insurance and Safety Fire?
Yes.
I would say it'd be minimal. I have, of course, I also have the responsibility of being the Industrial Loan Commissioner. I'm also the Comptroller General in the state of Georgia, in addition to regulating all the insurance companies and all the insurance agents in the state of Georgia. The mobile home manufacturing, manufactured housing, and I see Charlotte Gaddis is here, and she hadn't weighed in on this, but we supply the inspectors for them to make sure they comply with federal safety standards. It's going to take a lot of personnel, but I got Justin Durrance, who is here, to find out how many appeals. You ask about not appeals, but how many questions that we had to arbitrate between the local fire official and the state fire marshal's office, and on telephone calls and things like that, it was about 1,000 is what Dwayne Garris, who is our engineer that's in charge of plan inspection, said that he has to do. Let me tell you, during the campaign, I was told many, 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 many times that the state fire marshal's office would approve a set of plans, and that the construction company would go out there and start building that set of plans just like was approved. I mean, no variance from the plan at all. And then a local fire marshal would come in and say, whoops, that's not going to go. You're going to have to tear this sheetrock out, and you're going to have to do this. And that's the kind of things that we arbitrate, is whether or not is that necessary for safety. Safety is the first, is protection of the consumer is my #1 responsibility, whether it be in insurance, fire safety, or from industrial loans. It's to protect the consumers of the state of Georgia, and I take that job very seriously. But a lot of times, if the code says that in a building remodeling that the doorway, the exit has to be 25 feet from this particular point, and it's 25 feet and 6 inches, I think reasonableness will say we ought to grant a waiver for that. We ought not make them tear that door frame out and move it 6 inches. And that's the kind of thing that I think that the building the BOMA, the building managers, and the architects are talking about. They want somebody there that has reasonableness to arbitrate those disputes.
Are you the one who's arbitrating those disputes, or are you delegating it?
If they cannot resolve it in my staff, yes, they will bring it to me.
Who on your staff is doing it?
Well, the fire marshal is Alan Schumann, and then over the Propane Gas Association, and that's another group that says they're opposed to this bill. The Propane Gas is Chris Stevens. Dwayne Garris is in charge of the fire safety engineering. We've got quite a few members of the staff that are really looking at that, but every one of them can walk into my office when they have a situation that they want to talk about.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, it's not an elected official who is making those decisions?
It is ultimately when it comes to me. No, if we can get a resolution.
At the action officer level, it's not you though, correct?
But they're not taking appeals.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
That answers your question. No further questions. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to come up and join us today.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to bring back up Chairman Mullis for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to be back with you.
Any closing arguments you'd like to make on this?
I would like to respond to a few things. In fact, there have been some fuzzy explanations recently, and some of these guys here, the fire service, would actually like to thank Mr. Hudgens because they met with him July 2008 and talked about consolidating under the governor. They met with him in 2009 in August and talked about consolidating under the governor. And again, February, where he helped one of the fire chiefs in how to bring it out from the insurance department and consolidating under the governor. So, Mr. Hudgens has been aware of our intentions for quite some time. There's been no hidden secret here. Also, you know, I have pretty good confidence in the governor, Governor Deal, to make sure that no agency got out of line, and if it went under him, no agency would get out of line. I think that's his task as well, and I have confidence no matter who the governor is for that to happen in that regard. Also, there's no discussion, or has not been in our efforts to consolidate this, about the codes and the regulation. Our intentions has never been to change any of that. The same people that are enforcing them now would be then, through attrition and other means, would we consolidate the staff. And also the funding. I'd like to, if you check your bill on, I think, line 304, let me make sure. It talks about 303. The assets that are a part of this department's functions would also follow it. So I don't understand the money situation. You know, there's an exception of what we're doing to the consolidation that doesn't require a fiscal note. I think the counselor could agree with that. And our fiscal note so far, the Senate Budget Office has told us we're reducing by 10%, nearly $700,000 from a $6.9 million overall budget. So we feel confident. Now, we're not dictating or micromanaging the effects of putting this together. We want the new fire commissioner to know how to do that, whoever he or she may be. But I think this is exactly what we're struggling and trying to do in government now, make it more accountable, more efficient. And we do the regulations through legislation. They do not. They just enforce what we pass. And I have confidence that we would make sure we're not ridiculous, that we are level-headed in our decisions, as I feel confident today how we operate. But my effort is clearly to be more efficient so that the fire service can better serve the people of Georgia. By consolidating 3 or 2 to 1 is still a reduction, and that's my effort. Be glad to answer any questions.
You got one that I'm going to come up back with you there, but Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the consolidation and the possibility of cost savings, which I think is appealing to a number of individuals, would there also be some potential cost savings just with respect to the Commissioner of Insurance's salary? Because if they don't have as much duties, and I don't mean to be impertinent, but if they don't have, if some of their responsibilities are taken away, does that seem to make sense to maybe reduce some salaries in that regard too?
Well, Representative Hawkins, I haven't got to meet you yet and to form a good relationship, but you seem to be pretty smart. In fact, I would suggest opposition is clearly about that one issue. I told the governor, I said, your opposition is going to come from possible state employees that may feel they'll lose their job. That's not our intention. I hope we can do a lot of this through attrition, but there will be some other means that will have to be necessary. We're struggling financially. I don't know if anybody realizes that out there, but I know we are. So that may happen, and I think that's the base of the opposition. And also, a lot of these private sector folks that fear that the fire service is going to overregulate them, that has been created to make them fear the unknown. Our agenda is not that at all. In fact, I've offered and talked to the chairman about creating a appeal process in the current board we're establishing, not to make it bigger, but have the private sector, only one fire entity would be on that, so that it would be a valid discussion about an appeal. That would probably favor the private side, but with a respect for the code, whatever that could be. But thank you.
Chairman Mullis, I do appreciate all the time you've taken with me to help me on this bill, and as we have discussed, I know no doubt because of your background, mine, there's probably not too many people that support public safety. Yasmin, I'm keeping you in there, that more than us. And over the years, we have seen public safety get splintered and create new agencies and new directors and assistant directors and so on down the road. No doubt about it, firefighting is public safety. I mean, that's core function number one, is keeping the public safe. The thought is maybe bring firefighter under the umbrella of public safety, where I think it is a legitimate fit and good fit, And just kind of want to float that out there for, you don't got to give an answer now or think about it and
Mr.
just
Chairman,
look at it.
I'm an open-minded kind of guy.
And I know you are. That's why I love talking for you.
And you know, if we can create better government, I want to do that. You know, my current direction is what we have now, and again, make the private sector comfortable, because I truly want to assure them that my intentions is clearly to consolidate, to make efficient, not to overregulate. There's no regulations in this that changes, none. In fact, some of the same folks will be working with them that they're currently working with now. I think Commissioner Hudgens mentioned Alan Schumann. He's an outstanding fire marshal who has nothing to do with this issue, but we would hope that he'd remain that, if not be considered for the top guy. But that's not what we're here for today. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we'll continue talking.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions of the chairman? Thank you, sir. We will have another meeting. As I said before, this was a hearing only because I knew we was going to have a lot of people talking. I want this committee to do the job it always does. Read the bill carefully, look it over, let's discuss it, and make sure we do the best policy for this state. That's our number one job. I'll be letting you know either later on this week or the very beginning of next week when our next meeting will be. It will not go into public comments because that's what we've done today, and we want to make sure as we move forward, whatever we do the right thing for the citizens of the state of Georgia. So at this time, this meeting's adjourned. I appreciate everyone's attendance. Thank you.